This is a reassembly video for the Samsung Note 4. If you're looking for the disassembly video, it'll be down in the description. You can watch that first if you're looking to get a screen replacement, charge port replacement. First thing we're going to do with this reassembly is go ahead and re-put our earpiece speaker in. If you did remove that, just make sure that the ribbon cable is facing to the right hand side. Give it a little press in there and make sure it's nice and snug. Don't need it rattling if you have any loud sounds coming out of it. We're going to go ahead and reinstall our home button. So we'll go ahead and put the cable portion through the mid frame. You can see there's a little tiny hole over here and a post that it sits on. Go ahead and just push that into place and then push the ribbon cable all the way through. You can use a little bit of adhesive behind it. I find it's not really necessary. It usually stay in place all right. It doesn't have to be exactly perfect as long as it lines back up. Go ahead and flip it over. We can go ahead and start with the reassembly on the bottom portion here. We'll go ahead and put our charge ports and buttons back on. So go ahead and line them up. You can go ahead and put your screw in to the hole here, and that'll go ahead and hold the charge port in place as we put the back button and the other button down on the front here. So with that in place, we'll go ahead and just flip it over and just push these buttons back in correctly. So you can see this one has a little bit of a flange. Make sure you put these in nice and straight. If not, you may get some shadowing on the buttons below on the screen. So make sure they fit in just like they were. There's a kind of a little cutout for them, so you can't really mess them up too much. But you don't want to cut off portion of the light that would be coming through. Double check the home button, make sure that it functions properly. It's depressing. Perfect. Next step after that is go ahead and put our logic board back on. We'll go ahead and attach the charge port. We can lay this back down in place. Make sure that the earpiece speaker is back up above, and same thing with the home button ribbon cable, that it comes through and on top of the logic board. You may have to wiggle your camera into place too, so make sure it sits nice and flush. With that pushed down and correctly in place, we'll go ahead and put the screw back in to the logic board as well. This side here seems a little bit more flimsy, which is okay. When we put our back piece on, it'll go ahead and hold this nice and flush. What we also will need to do is reinsert these wire connectors here onto the logic board, the red and the gray one. Depending upon your cables or your phone model, it may be a different color, so don't worry if they're not the exact color. Just make sure that when you're disassembling, you catch where these go. Normally, the further to the right it is on the bottom, it goes to the bottom right of the logic board. Go ahead and push this into this little guide slot just right here. That way it doesn't interfere with the loudspeaker off the housing when we reinstall that. These can be a little tricky to get on. It's kind of like a button on a pair of jeans. So let's go ahead and line it up and then push down, and it'll go ahead and snap into place. Don't be too forceful. They are fairly easy to damage. Just give it a nice even pressure. They're not really hard to snap on. Doesn't take a lot of force. The trick is lining them up correctly. There we go. We'll go ahead and just push our cable back into its place here as well. Looks like everything's going back together nice and smooth. Alright, our next step is to take our rear housing and go ahead and put this into it. So like I was saying, we're going to do this a little bit backwards from the disassembly, but I find this a little bit easier. Push the charge port in at the bottom first, then snap it down the sides and the top. Make sure the home button's still functioning properly. Make sure that all the interior snaps are connected around the battery port as well. Double check your power and your volume buttons to make sure that they function properly. So the next step we're going to do is go ahead and insert all the remaining 16 screws back in the back to readhere the housing to the midframe. Now the whole reason why we are basically doing this reassembly this way is we can go ahead and secure the midframe, and then we can line our LCD or our display up just perfectly on the midframe as well as the kind of the housing portion of the device. I'm just putting my nylon tool underneath there so I don't depress the home button too much as I'm putting these screws back in. So like I was saying, that way we can line up the display into the housing. You notice when we were removing it, we were trying to cut the adhesive away from the housing itself. And so what we want to do is get that adhesive back on there so we get a nice flush fit. That way it'll look like it's basically just right back from the factory when we get done with it. Now, like I was saying, if you're looking to try to do the screen portion rather than take the whole phone apart, you can basically do what's the opposite of this video. So you really wouldn't even have to take out any of these screws. It would be basically the remaining portion of this video in reverse. Few more screws to go. Now I could basically fast forward through this part, and I definitely understand that. I'm not putting this in here just to make because I don't know how to fast forward or edit something. I do it because I want you to see exactly what the time frame that you're looking at to reassemble, as well as kind of the skill that it would take to do so. So I understand that I could fast forward. I could make the video shorter. I choose not to give a better view of what this really takes. Alright, that should be our last screw there. Now that we have everything put back together, we can take our display and basically re-put it back onto the mid-frame and the housing here. Now what you can do, and what I will probably choose to do, is put some adhesive strips just right down the side here, basically to re-adhere the middle of the device. Helps it from trying to pull up from the sides if it has some adhesive down the middle. Just make sure you're using some very thin 3M adhesive that you're doing this with. You don't want it to try to bulge up from anything that's very thick. You also don't have to put these on. I just find it useful. Give me a peace of mind that it'll stay on for quite some time. I just kind of imagine that the adhesive would be there for a reason. Alright, so we're looking good. Our home button's functioning. Everything put back together, starting to look much like a phone. So we have our new display here. It's definitely all in one piece, not like the other one. So what we need to do is go ahead and reattach our two ribbon cables here. We'll start with this one on the side first. Now if you're looking to do the screen only like I was saying, you'd want to stop short of these cables here. And you wouldn't have to disassemble the entirety of the phone. I do find it easier to try to remove the display that way, but you don't have to do it that particular way. You can go ahead and heat it up like we did, and then just use some playing cards and cut the display away. Now these cables can be a little bit tricky because they're inset into the mid frame. This one to the right here is particularly the most difficult one. I think it's the S Pen one. You may have to finagle it a little bit to get it to kind of snap into place. We'll go ahead and take our backing off. We'll also need to take the pre-applied adhesive off. Now if you're reapplying a screen, really all you would need to do is basically just take adhesive and put it on just the way it was all the way around the display. The top and bottom have thicker pieces of adhesive, but nothing too crazy. Now that we have that removed, we're going to go ahead and put our speaker grill in. You'll see that there's a portion of the speaker grill that has a flange on it, and another portion of the grill that does not. It basically has a wider portion and a thinner portion. You want this wider portion, which I'm pointing to here, to go towards the top portion of the screen. The more narrow portion will go towards the bottom. Push that in so it stays. Then we can go ahead and lay the screen down. We're going to make sure that we get it nice and snug at the very top. Make sure our home button fits all the way through, and then we'll run our fingers down the sides to make sure it stays in place. Double check the home button real fast before you get too far. Make sure it still functions properly. We can take our glass protector off here. You can see a nice shiny new display. Work your way around the edges here. We want to make sure that it's nice and snug. It's a lot easier than trying to line it up on the mid frame and then put it back in place, which is why I do it this way. We can go and reassemble everything. We can put our S pin back in, put our battery back in, put our back cover on. Go ahead and try to power it on. It looks like, unfortunately, the phone is dead. So we're going to go ahead and connect a charge cable to it here real fast. Now if your phone's very, very dead, it can take some time to get a charge screen to show that it's actually getting a drip charge. It'll show this screen right here. Here we go. We got a 2% charge on it after a few seconds of charging. Go ahead and power it on. Test the display. Alright, so we're looking good. It's promising at this point. So you can see that we have our buttons lighting up there at the bottom. Touch function is working for us. Perfect, so there you go. There's a complete disassembly and a reassembly of the Samsung Note 4. If you found this video useful, go ahead and hit that like button. I'd appreciate it. If you have any questions, go ahead and throw them down in the comments. I'll do my best to get to them when I can. If you want to see any future videos on future phones, anything from high-range, mid-range to low-range phones, I try to replace them all. Hit the subscribe button, and I'll catch you on the next video.